The day my son's friend visited was one of the strangest and most exciting days of my life. It all began on an otherwise ordinary Saturday afternoon. The sun dipped over the horizon, casting a warm golden glow through the living room windows. I leaned against the kitchen table, a glass of water in my hand, the soft sound of the evening news playing in the background. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend. My son Daniel was away camping with his college friends. I left the house uncharacteristically quietly. Then the doorbell rang. I didn't expect anyone to put down my glass. I went to the door and saw Sebastian, Daniel's best friend, standing there. His dark eyes twinkled hesitantly. His posture seemed apologetic as he greeted me. "Hello, Mr. Johnson," he said with a shy smile. "I hope I didn't disturb you." Daniel asked me to stop by if I needed to borrow anything for the trip. Little did I know he had already left. Sebastian had been friends with Daniel for years. Watched him grow from awkward preteen to awkward teenager. Confident, athletic young man, Sebastian always exuded a quiet maturity that shone through his demeanor. A warm smile that put others at ease. He was always polite and considerate. The kind of friend any parent would want for their child. "It's okay," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "What do you need?" He moved over, almost looking embarrassed. "Actually, I left my sleeping bag at home." I thought Daniel had an extra one? I laughed, shaking my head. "Maybe he has one." He let me check the garage. I motioned for him to follow me. As we walked toward the garage, I couldn't help but notice how much he'd changed since I'd last seen him. He was taller, now wider. Shirt clung to his body in a way that clearly showed he went to the gym regularly. I felt a strange jolt of awareness. Immediately, I pushed him into the garage. I rummaged through a pile of camping gear until I found my spare sleeping bag. I handed it to him, dusting it off. "Here," I said to Daniel. "No problem," he said with a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson." He hesitated for a moment before adding, "Do you mind if I stay a little while?" My driver wasn't due for an hour and I didn't want to sit in the car. "Of course," I said, "come in." We ended up in the kitchen where I made some coffee. Sebastian leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, and we talked about his classes, his summer plans, and camping. He had always been easy to talk to, thoughtful and articulate in a way that made conversation seem natural. But as the minutes passed, I began to notice something different. How his gaze lingered a second longer than necessary when our eyes met. He leaned closer as he leaned against the counter, his presence filling the space between us. I tried to dismiss it as a fantasy, but when he reached for his cup, his fingers brushed mine, and I was shocked by the warmth of his touch. "Sorry," he said, quickly withdrawing his hand. I forced a small laugh. It was a bit awkward, but the tension in the room was palpable, the air between us thick with unspoken words. I drank my coffee, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had settled in my chest. It was Sebastian, my son's best friend. Whatever I thought, I felt something. It wasn't real. It couldn't be Mr. Johnson. After a long silence, his voice trailed off. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." I said, turning to face him. He hesitated, his gaze dropping to Theffler before meeting mine. "Have you ever felt like you wanted something you knew?" Shouldn't the question caught me off guard and I felt my pulse quicken? That's a pretty heavy question. I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Hegov." Small, self-conscious laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Ye sorry, I guess. I've just been thinking about it a lot lately." There was something in his tone, an honesty, a vulnerability that made my chest tighten. I wanted to ask him what he meant, to understand what was going on in his mind, but I wasn't sure. I was ready to hear the answer. "Sometimes we want things that aren't good for us." I said carefully, "It's human nature, but that doesn't mean behave. To act on them." He nodded, his gaze distant. "Yeah, I guess you're right, but..." Way he looked at me after he said it, the flicker of something in his eyes. The way his lips parted slightly as if he wanted to say more. It left me unsettled. I turned back to the coffee pot, hoping the act of pouring us both another cup would give me something to focus on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, and I wasn't sure if it was something I could ignore. Coffee sat untouched. Between USAs, the conversation grew sparse. I could feel Sebastian's presence like a heavy weight, and every subtle movement he made seemed magnified in the silence. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't normal either. It was charged like some mething. Unsaid was hanging in the air, waiting to break. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, stretching slightly, and caught myself glancing at him out of the corner of my eye. His shirt lifted just enough to reveal a strip of taut, Tenetskin, and I immediately looked away, my face warming. This is ridiculous, a thought. Get a grip, so I said, breaking the silence. Are you excited about the camping trip? He shrugged his lips, curving into a small smile. Yeah, I guess I mean it's more for Daniel, really. He loves that kind of stuff. I'm just there for the company. His words made me smile. That sounds like you, I said, always looking out for him. You've been a great friend too, Daniel, over the years. Sebastian looked down, his fingers toying with the edge of his mug. He's been a good friend to me too, he said, quietly thawing. After a pause, he added, you've been good to me too. There it was again, that softness in his tone, the unspoken layers behind his words. My chest tightened as he searched his face for some clue about what he was trying to say, but he didn't meet my gaze. I just mean he continued to be. Always made me feel welcome, like part of the family. That's not something I take for granted. I nodded, unsure of how to respond. Well, you are a part of the family, Sebastian. At least that's how I see it. He smiled at that, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Thanks, Mr. Johnson said. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, you can call me Sebastian. You know, the Mr. Johnson thing feels too formal. I chuckled. All right, Sebastian, but only if you stop calling me Mr. Johnson, deal? He said, his grin widening just enough to ease some of the tension in the room. We moved into the living room after that, settling onto the couch. Sun had set, and the soft glow of the table lamp cast warm shadows across the room. Sebastian sat at the far end of the couch, his posture relaxed, but his eyes focused on me. Can I ask you something? He said after a long stretch of silence. Of course, I replied, bracing myself for another loaded question. Have you ever felt like there was something you couldn't say out loud even though you really wanted to? I frowned, caught off guard by the question. I think everyone feels that way at some point. Said carefully, but sometimes saying it out loud is the only way to move forwards? Bastian nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. Yeah, he said softly. But what if saying it changes everything? His words sent a chill down my spine, though I couldn't say why. I shifted in my seat, suddenly aware of how close we were, even with the space between us. Sometimes change is a good thing, I said, trying to keep my tone steady. Even if it's scary at first. He looked up, then his eyes locking onto mine. What if it's not through it? His gaze was almost too much, and I found myself looking away, unsure of how to navigate the sudden shift in your conversation. I guessed it depends on what you're afraid of. Sebastian didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I'm afraid of ruining this, of ruining what we have. The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard, and I felt my heart clench. Sebastian, never mind, he said, quickly cutting me off. He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair. I should probably go my rides. Probably close by now. I stood, too instinctively reaching out to stop him. My hand closed around his arm, and he froze, his eyes wide. As he looked down at where we touched, you don't have to go, I said, my voice soft. Not if you don't want to. Sebastian's gaze lifted to meet mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Thea between us felt heavy, electric, like the moment before a storm. Then he took a step closer, closing the distance between us. I don't know what I'm doing, admitted, his voice trembling. I just know I don't want to leave. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt a surge of emotions I couldn't name. Fear, confusion, longing, they all swirled together, leaving me breathless. Sebastiani said, my voice barely audible. We can't. No, he whispered, but I can't help it. He reached out then, his hand brushing against mine, and I felt a spark, an undeniable pull that left me frozen in place. I wanted to step back to put some distance between us, but I couldn't. Instead, I found myself leaning into Themament, my heart pounding in my chest, and then it happened. His lips brushed against mine, soft, tentative, like he was testing the waters. My mind screamed at him to pull away, but my body betrayed me, frozen in place as the kiss deepened. The keys lingered in the air between us, leaving a weight I didn't know how to bear. The world outside seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of us in the dimly lit living room. Sebastian's breath was shallow, his hand hovering near Manea's, if he was unsure whether to pull away or come closer. I started, but the words caught in my throat. He stepped back abruptly, running a hand through his harem. "So sorry," he blurted, his voice shaky. "I didn't mean to. I don't know what." I was thinking. My chest felt tight, my heart pounding against my ribs. As I searched for something to say, "Sebastian, it's you, it's okay," I managed, though. I wasn't sure if I meant it. Nothing about this felt okay, and yet I couldn't deny the way my body had responded the way. I had leaned into the kiss, however briefly. He turned it away, pacing across the room. "No, it's not. It's not okay. I shouldn't have. God, Daniel would kill me if he knew." At the mention of my son, a cold wave of reality washed over me. This was wrong, so wrong, and yet the tension between us remained undeniable. "An unrelenting Sebastian," I said gently, trying to steady my voice. "We need to talk about this." He stopped pacing, his shoulders tense, as he turned to face me. "What is there to talk about?" He crossed a line. I messed up. "I'm sorry." I took a step closer, my hands trembling at my sides. "It's not just you." I admitted, the words tasting foreign in my mouth. "You." I felt it too. His eyes widened, and for a moment the air between us crackled with something unspoken. Then he shook his head, his expression conflicted. "Weckent," he said firmly, "you're Daniel's dad. I'm his best friend. This whatever this is, it's not supposed to happen, I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it already has." The silence the thought followed was suffocating. Sebastian sat down on the couch, burying his face in his hands. I wanted to say something that might make this easier, but the truth was, I didn't know how to navigate this either. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and longing. "What do we do now?" I sat down beside him, careful to leave some space. "Between us, I don't know," I admitted, "but we need to figure it out." He nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I don't want to lose this," he said softly. "Not just whatever. This is but you, your friendship, your trust. I don't want to ruin end of everything." His words hit me hard, and I felt a pang of guilt for putting him in this position. Sebastian had always been like family, someone I could rely on and trust, and yet here we were standing on the edge of something that could destroy all of that. "You're not going to lose, May," said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "No matter what happens, we'll figure this out." He leaned into my touch, his body relaxing slightly under my hand. "You mean that?" he asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I mean it," I said firmly. "But we have to be careful. This isn't just about us. It's about Daniel, too." At the mention of my son, Sebastian nodded, his expression somber. "You're right," he said. "We can't let him find out. It would destroy him." The weight of that truth settled over us, a reminder of just how precarious our situation was. But even as we sat there wrapped in silence, I couldn't ignore the way my hand lingered on his shoulder, or the way his body seemed to lean into mine. Hours passed, and the tension between us didn't ease. We talked in circles, trying to make sense of what had happened and what it meant. But no matter how hard we tried to rationalize it, the pull between us remained undeniable and unrelenting. Sebastian, apparently, did not have Tolive anymore, and we talked for hours sometimes. We touched, but we both did not want to. But still, there was a certain tension between us for the whole night, a tension that told me there was more coming, and that I wanted more, and so did he. I felt as the clock ticked past midnight. Sebastian stood, his movements hesitant. "I should go," he said, his voice heavy with reluctance. I stood too, following him to the door. "Take care of yourself," I said, my chest tightening as he reached for the handle. He paused, turning to look at me one last time. "You too," he said, his eyes searching mine. "And thank you for not hating me." It managed a small smile. "There's nothing to hate, Sebastian, just be careful." "Okay," I nodded, his gaze lingering on mine for a moment, before he stepped out into the night as the door closed behind him. I leaned against it, my mind racing with everything that had happened, and everything that might still happen. Echoes deep down. I knew for a fact that this wasn't over yet. The way he looked him in the eyes, the way we kissed, the way we touched each other, told me I was not done with him. He had evoked something in me I had never felt before, such a young and handsome guy. Sure, every gay man would want to do certain things with him, and I felt he was open to it, so that left me thinking how I could make this work. The days following Sebastian's visit were a blur of emotions I couldn't touch. I went through Rustow. I went through the motions, work errands, the occasional phone call from Daniel, but my thoughts were consumed by that night, by him, Sebastian. I told myself it would pass, that this was just a fleeting moment of weakness, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, heard his voice, felt the warmth of his hand lingering against Mineth. Weight of it all was suffocating, and yet I couldn't bring myself to let go. It was late on a Thursday when the knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. And Daniel was still out of town. Me heart jumped at the sound, a mix of anxiety and hope rushing through me when I opened the door. There he was, Sebastian. I shouldn't be here, he said. Before I could say anything, his hand shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. I know he shouldn't, but and couldn't stay away the sight of him standing there. Heist's expression, a mix of vulnerability and determination, left me speechless. I stepped aside, wordlessly inviting him in. He hesitated for a moment before crossing the threshold, his presence filling the space in a way that felt both familiar and foreign. I've been thinking about what happened, he said, as he stood in the entryway, his gaze fixed on the floor, and I can't stop thinking about you. His words hit me like a punch to the chest, and I felt the air leave my Sebastian. We talked about this, it's complicated. I know, he said quickly, his voice trembling. I know it's complicated. I know it's wrong, but that doesn't change how I feel. I don't know how till Mike. It stopped. I wanted to tell him that he wasn't alone, that I had been feeling the same way, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I reached out my hand, brushing against his arm. He flinched at the touchpad. He didn't pull away, Sebastian, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. Can't keep doing this. I know. He repeated, his gaze finally lifting. Tommy, it mine, but it's not that easy, is it? If it were, I wouldn't be here. His honesty left me raw, stripped of any defenses. I might have tried to put up a step closer, my hand still on his arm. What do you want me to say? I don't know, admitted his voice breaking. I don't want to lose you. You won't, I said firmly, though. I wasn't sure I believed it myself. Boothus, whatever this is, it can't go any further. His shoulders slumped, and I saw the weight of my words settle over him. I don't know if I can stop feeling this way, he said quietly. Neither could I, Booty. Didn't say it. We ended up in the living room again, sitting on opposite ends of the couch like we had the last time. The space between us felt like a chasm impossible to bridge. Without falling into the same mistakes. I've known you for so long, Sebastian said, suddenly breaking silence. You've always been this constant in my life, someone I could trust, someone Hokered, and somewhere along the way that turned into this. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening at his words. I care about you too, Sebastian, but this is dangerous. It could ruin everything, he nodded, his gaze dropping to his hands. I know. I don't want to ruin anything, but I also don't want to pretend like this doesn't exist. The room felt unbearably quiet, the weight of our unspoken feelings pressing down on us. I wanted to say something, to find the right words to make this easier, but nothing came. I should go, he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. Sebastian, no, he interrupted, standing abruptly. I can't stay here, no Tief. It means feeling like this, and not being able to do anything about it. I stood to my heart racing as he turned. Neto, leave, wait, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He froze, his hand on the door knob. What? I don't want you to go, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I don't know what to do about this either, but I don't want you to leave. He turned slowly, his eyes wide with surprise. You mean that? I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, I do. The attention in the room shifted, the air between us crackling with unspoken possibilities. He took a hesitant step toward me, his eyes searching mine for permission, for reassurance. I don't want to make things shorter, he said, softly, but being here, being around you, it's Bua, even when I know it shouldn't. My resolve crumbled at his words, and before I could stop myself, I closed the distance between us. My hand found his, and he laced his fingers through mine. His touch both tentative and certain wear, playing with fire, I said, my voice barely audible. Maybe. He said, a faint smile tugging at his lips, but it doesn't feel wrong, not to me. The hours that followed were a blur of whispered confessions and stolen moments. We didn't cross any lines, not really, not yet. But connection between us deepened, growing into something that felt impossible to ignore. As Dawn broke, casting a soft light over the living room. We sat together on the couch, his head resting against my shoulder. Neither of us spoke, but the silence felt comfortable, like a truce. I knew this wasn't sustainable, that we couldn't keep walking this line without it breaking, but for now, at this moment, I let myself lean into it, knowing that the real world would come crashing in soon enough. After a long moment of silence, Sebastian said, "Mr. Johnson, I'm going to be honest with you. I really like you, and I don't want to hide it anymore. I'm still not sure how you feel about it, but I really need to get this off my chest." And in that moment, the tension changed immediately. I felt a moment of excitement go through me. Sebastian had put himself in such a vulnerable position and had confessed us. Feelings that I said, "Sebastian, I am so happy you're finally telling me this." "No, I have been feeling the same, and you attract me a lot. You're such a smart, handsome, and good-looking young man that it really excites." But I got interrupted. He grabbed me with him and kissed me this time a lot deeper, more sensitive. And I felt this was a relief for both of us. The kiss deepened, and after a minute of heavy kissing, he grabbed me on places I'd loved it to be touched by him. I let it all happen. The age difference did not matter. This was pure love now that his hurt was on the ground. I could finally enjoy his muscular upper body. At one moment, he stopped kissing me and went down. He did the thing, and even though I won't go in detail, I can tell you it was amazing. His lips were so masculine yet so soft that it drove me crazy. It went from bad to worse, and we did everything you can imagine. After we both finished, we lay there in each other's arms. It didn't take long before Sebastian fell asleep. He must have been exhausted. A moment later, I dozed off too. A couple hours later, as the sun rose higher, casting long shadows through the living room, as the weight of what we'd shared settled over us, Sebastian shifted slightly, his head still resting on Miss Holder. For a moment, I allowed myself to revel in the warmth of his presence, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way his hand lightly brushed mine. But the silence wasn't empty. It was heavy with the implications of what done eventually. Sebastian stirred, lifting his head and rubbing his eyes. "I should go," hissed, his voice thick with exhaustion. "Before Daniel comes back." I nodded, knowing he was right, but feeling the ache of the impending distance between us. "Yeah, that's probably best." He stood and stretched, the light catching his face in a way that made my chest tighten. There was a vulnerability in his expression, a mixture of guilt and longing that mirrored my own. He hesitated, as if he wanted to say something, but instead he just gave me a small, sad smile. "Thank you," he said. Soft lifer, a knot pushing me away. I stood to running a hand through my hair as it tried to find the right words. "Ouch, Sebastian, it's complicated. I don't know where we go from here, but I know I don't want to lose you. I care about you more than it probably should, but this can't be something we ignore." "Not anymore," he nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know. I feel the same way." The air between us was charged, every unsaid word hanging in the space. Finally, he stepped toward the door, pausing. With his hand on the handle, "I'll call you," he said, glancing back at me. "Okay?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Take care of yourself, you two," he replied, before slipping out into the morning light. The days that followed were excruciating. Sebastian's absence was palpable, his absence leaving a void I hadn't anticipated. Daniel returned home, oblivious to the tension brewing beneath the surface. I did my best to act normal, to bury the emotions that threatened to bubble over every time I thought about Sebastian, but it wasn't easy every time. Me phone buzzed, my heart leapt, hoping it was him, but he didn't call, and the silence between us grew heavier with each passing day. A week later, Sebastian showed up at my door again. There was no pretense, no excuses. He stood on the porch, his hands shoved into his pockets, his eyes meeting mine with a determination that stole my breath. "I couldn't stay away," he said, his voice steady, but tinged with vulnerability. I tried, but I couldn't. I stepped aside, letting him in without a word. He moved past me, his presence filling the space as if he'd never left. We stood in the hallway, the weight of our unspoken feelings pressing down on us. I thought about everything he said, turning to face me, about you, about Yuza, about Daniel. And I know it's messy and complicated, but I also know I can't pretend like I don't feel this way. Not anymore. His words broke something, opening me, and I felt a rush of emotions I couldn't contain. Sebastian. I started, but he cut me off. Him. Not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just needed to tell you, to be honest with you, I don't want to hide this anymore. Even if it means walking away. The thought of him walking away was unbearable, and before I could stop myself, I closed the distance between us. My hands found his face, and I pulled him into a kiss that was both desperate and tender. He responded immediately, his arms wrapping around me as if he were afraid I might disappear. We broke apart, both of us breathing heavily, our foreheads pressed together. I don't know where this goes, I admitted, my voice trembling. But I don't want to lose you. You won't, he said, his voice firm. We'll figure it out together. And the months that followed were a delicate balancing act. Sebastian and I navigated our feelings carefully, keeping our connection hidden from Daniel and the world. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of fear, of questioning whether we were doing the right thing, but through it all, we clung to each other, finding solace in the bond we had forged. We knew it couldn't last forever, that the truth would come out eventually, but for now we allowed ourselves to exist in the in-between, savoring the stolen moments and quiet confessions that made up our new reality. And as I looked at Sebastian, his smile lighting up the room, I knew one thing. For certain, whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, because some connections are too powerful to ignore, too deep to deny, and this, whatever this was worth fighting for.